Yesenia. I wanted to leave you some feedback on your thesis statement and outline. So you're using, or sorry, you're going to be writing about the use of force, which is a great choice for this essay. So I can see the beginnings of a summary, and I can see the beginnings of a thesis statement and an outline. I think the key ideas that you're bringing up in support of the thesis are good moments in the text. So they are good moments to bring into the paper to explore in the body. I want to give you some feedback on how to make your introductory paragraph stronger, and then also some feedback on considering how to organize your key points. So, first off, remember when you write a summary, you want to state the title and the author directly in the text. So you want to make sure that you get the story title and the author. So you could say something to the effect of the short story, The Use of Force by Carlos Williams, is about a doctor who assists a new patient and is invited into their home. So make sure you get that in there. Let's talk a little bit about your verb choice here. So what I would do is get this whole thing in present tense. So there's no need for the is, just say assists and invites. In addition, you probably want to flip-flop those, right? Because he's invited before he assists. So flip-flop those. In addition, you probably want to be more concrete here. So instead of saying a new patient in their home, because here you say daughter, their daughter, but note that we still don't know who the there is, if that makes sense. So I think slow down your pacing here and bring in more of those details in the plot summary, right? So he is invited into a family's home, and the reason why they invite him there is so he can assist them in diagnosing their daughter, right? They're worried that she has diphtheria. Get that basic plot, all those basic plot details in there. So in the next sentence, the doctor is needed to make a diagnosis on their daughter. I think here I would say the doctor is needed to diagnose their daughter. And whenever you're referring to a person, the pronoun here you want to use is who, not which. So instead of saying which is, you want to say their daughter, who is very frightened by the doctor. I kind of like this detail here that you are talking about prejudice and bias, but note that there's not enough information in this sentence to really follow what you mean. So I like this idea, but I would take this idea and maybe move it after the summary and the thesis, if that makes sense. So let's come back to this in just a moment. So the doctor was impatient and assaulted, not assaulting, assaulted the little girl who he was then able to diagnose. So you got some tweaking here to do in your verbs and your verb tense and in the clarity. I think before you state your claim, make sure to get in what you think Williams's main point is. So why would he want to write an essay about the doctor's inappropriate use of force, right? What do texts like these help the reader think about? Or you might even narrow that in saying, what do texts like these, how can they help professionals? Like what we talked in class, what we talked about in class. So then you say the doctor's actions, and I think you mean were not justified to help the little girl. What you're missing here is the reason why, right? So you need the because. So the doctor's actions were not justified because why? Why weren't they justified? What did he do that was inappropriate or wrong, right? Is it because the ends do not justify the means, right? Meaning is she worse by the end of the story? Will this have a long-term effect, right? So you want to make sure that you get your get your claim in there as well. So I also talked to you about this sentence here. I like the idea that you want to talk about bias and prejudice, but you don't have enough information here for the reader to know exactly what you're talking about. So you say, this takes place in the mid 1930s to 1950s, which in those days was all about different prejudice and biases. I don't know what you're referring to there specifically. So that time frame was like the beginning, like the tail end of it was the beginning of the civil rights era. So note that might be what you're talking about. I'm not entirely sure, especially because, we could even say 21st century America, we are constantly having conversations in the public forum about racism, right? So think about the current moment right now. And so if I were to say something like 21st century America was coming to grips with racism, I would want to give examples of that, right? So I would talk about what happened with George Floyd over the summer, and I would talk about probably some of the resulting protests, right? I would talk about Breonna Taylor, right, and what protests and reactions occurred after that, right? Does that make sense? So what you have is like this really broad claim, but we as the reader, the reader has no idea what you're referring to. So you need to go into more depth there, and I would recommend that being its own paragraph. So finally, I think you have some really good key ideas to help you unpack the doctor's use of force. However, I would have you rethink the order. So I would actually start with your last idea first, your second idea second. I like that. And then the final point as your last point, because that mimics the organization of the essay really well, and it kind of seems like that's an organization that makes sense, right? It went from being uncomfortable to really uncomfortable to being, perhaps wrong, right? And it progressively gets worse, right? The doctor's anger and how he treats the little girl gets progressively worse, where he says several moments in the text, I should have left, I should have come back when I was calmed down, but he ignores those voices and goes for it anyway. So I think that order would make more sense. So I want you to slow down your pace, go back and review these sentences, pay attention to the ideas that you're expressing, pay attention to your verb tenses, and make sure that you're getting all the details in there that the reader needs. I think you have a good working claim, and I think it's one that could work for this essay, but you need to make sure that you include the reason for the claim as well. All right? Contact me if you have any questions or you want me to look at any revisions. Thanks.